James, give us your impressions of Al Haig's long career.
Well, Alexander Haig is an important figure, as you say, in the second half of the 20th century. His public service career spanned from his military service in Korea, where he was an aide to Douglas MacArthur, the general, and of course he was a highly decorated Vietnam War veteran. But he was perhaps the most skilled practitioner of what we might call palace politics in the White House of the 1960s and 70s. He was able to insinuate himself into the highest echelons of American politics, even though he was a military officer, and he was able to leapfrog some 240 more senior officers to attain the rank of four-star general. In the Nixon White House in particular, he was a character of supreme intrigue. He was one of the prime movers behind the wiretapping of 17 National Security Council aides when he was the Deputy National Security Advisor under Henry Kissinger. He was, and I don't take any pleasure in saying this, but he was instrumental in the Joint Chiefs of Staff being able to spy on Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger during wartime, in an incident called the Maurer-Radford affair, in which a young Navy stenographer attached to Henry Kissinger's staff was literally rifling through Kissinger's briefcases while he slept on overnight flights and that sort of thing, and was able to steer 5,000 documents to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It was Al Haig who put that yeoman in that place. And Richard Nixon came to believe that Haig was instrumental in that spying. Nonetheless, Nixon appointed him Chief of Staff during the Watergate period. And it was during that period that Haig was part of even greater intrigues involving the disclosure of Nixon's taping system and ultimately the pardon that President Ford gave to ex-President Nixon.
James, apart from the intrigue, James, apart from the intrigue, what were his accomplishments for this country, do you believe?
He is credited with having steered the ship of state in the final days of Watergate, when perhaps President Nixon's frame of mind was not ideal for a commander-in-chief. He did serve his country loyally and bravely in combat. And as Secretary of State in the Reagan administration, Haig worked hard on the issues of the day, which included the war in Lebanon, the Falklands War, and so on. I do want to tell one really fascinating Al Haig story, if I may.
Please.
Which is that it took, and you may hear my son burbling in the background. I'm in a car right now. But it took 8 years before Alexander Haig agreed to an interview with me for my book, The Strong Man, John Mitchell and the Secrets of Watergate, which was published after 17 years of work 2 years ago. This was in the year 2000. I went to Haig's office. I bought a special new tape recorder for the occasion. I bought a little clip-on microphone. He sat there while I clipped the microphone on his tie. At this point in his life, Haig was about 75 years old, very sharp mentally, very combative. He had been doing interviews for about 40 years by this point, so he was well practiced at them. He was a source for Bob Woodward's book, The Final Days, about Watergate, unmistakably, although not deep-throated. And so he was very skilled at this. When we wanted to go off the record, we turned off the tape recorder. When he wanted to go back on the record, we turned it back on. We spoke for about 2.5 hours. In this interview, he said many scabrous, harsh things about a lot of people, including Ronald and Nancy Reagan, George Shultz, who succeeded him as Secretary of State. And it went on for 2.5 hours. I typed up the transcript word for word myself within a day and sent it to his office as a courtesy. And the next day, I got a call from Haig's Chief of Staff saying, in essence, that they expected that the entire interview was off the record. I said, on what planet do you reside, sir? And they said, well, you know, gosh, he's saying all kinds of things in this interview. What can I tell the general that will allow him to sleep at night? That was literally what his chief of staff said to me. I said, well, you might quote The Godfather. That is to say, if I wanted to kill you, you'd be dead already. Not long thereafter, they sent me the transcript marked up, deleting what they didn't like that he had said, and inserting in its stead whole paragraphs of completely bland sentences, and insisted again that I consider this to be the interview. And I asked them again, do we reside somewhere in China? Where do you think you are? What kind of practice do you think this is? And I was doing live shots for Fox News during the Bush v. Gore lawsuit and I was standing outside the vice president's mansion in the snow at one point when my cell phone rang, and it was Alexander Haig. And he said, Jim, I've gotten a look at the manuscript you sent me. And I had to be firm right at the outset. And I said, General, it is a transcript, not a manuscript. And he said, well, I think you've got some mistakes in there. I said, like what? He said, well, like you've got me saying and then he used the F word, and I never used and then he said the F word. I said, General, it is an exact transcript. And I tried to just get off the topic, and I said, I see where they're making a movie about the day that Ronald Reagan was shot, and they've got Richard Dreyfuss playing you. And he said, well, they probably got me shooting him.
Wow, James, what an insight, what an experience that you had in writing your great book about this and talking to him. So your final thoughts on his death today?
Well, he served his country bravely and loyally in combat. He was a supreme political infighter, a shrewd character, steeped in intrigues, and we deserve a very good biography of him.
Well, thank you so much, James. You know, your insight is valuable this morning as we look back at the life of Alexander Haig.